Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2010 Power Workshops presented by the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse. For those of you who are not familiar with the Clearinghouse, let me give you a little background. We were created in 1998, and it was a cooperative agreement between the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, the Federal Highway Administration, who is the funder of the Clearinghouse, and then the operating partner is the Texas Transportation Institute in College Station, Texas. We've been in operation now for a number of years, 12 years, and in recent years, again with renewed funding from the Federal Highway Administration, we've greatly expanded our programs and our services and these conferences, and hopefully you're familiar with some of the webinars that we present that are all free to the public, and we try to make this information as accessible as possible. And as we start out, I shared this story I think a couple of years ago, but I think it's particularly useful to kind of remind ourselves who are involved in safety what it's all about. Because we see the statistics, and they've been looking good. Recently we've seen some drops in the work zone fatalities, down from around 1,100 a few years ago. We're down, around 800 now, so into the 700s. So we've seen some really good progress in reducing work zone fatalities. On the worker side of the equation, it's been pretty flat. We're still seeing between 100 and 130 workers killed every year, so we need to see a little bit of improvement there. So sometimes as safety professionals or whatever we're working in, the DOTs, the agencies, the contractors, it seems like we're working hard and don't see a lot of progress. And it reminded me of a story I once heard about a man who came up on the beach after high tide and the tide had receded, and the beach was strewn with starfish. And of course, soon the sun would be out and these starfish would be getting hot and dying, not being in the water. And there were literally thousands of starfish spread out across the beach. And he saw a young man, maybe 10 years old, picking them up and throwing them back into the water. And of course, the more seasoned guy looked at those starfish and that boy, and he thought, well, he's not going to make a whole lot of progress there before the sun comes out. And so he turned to the boy and he said, young man, you're wasting your time. There's no way you can save these thousands of starfish. And the boy just kept picking them up and throwing them back into the ocean. And again, the more seasoned guy said, you really can't make a difference here. There are thousands of these starfish and you're getting one at a time. And after throwing a couple more in, the young boy turned to the old gentleman and said, well, it made a difference to that one. And so I think that's kind of how we approach our jobs in safety. That it's a big task, but we take it one at a time. And we try to prevent those one death, two deaths that we can, and as we slowly make progress over the years, as we have done in more recent times, that's really what it's all about. And that's what I think you'll find from our presenters here today, people who are truly committed to safety. And I think that's the reason why many of you are here today, because of that true and deep commitment. This morning, in this session, we have several presenters that will talk to you a little bit about what's going on in Washington, D.C. and what the government is doing to promote safety in work zones. First of all, we'll hear briefly from Chung Ng. And Chung is, and I won't go in detail, you should have in front of you a paper here that has all the bios of the various presenters, and there you'll find the details of each presenter, so we won't take the time to read all of that. But Chung is basically the work zone team leader at the Federal Highway Administration. Across all the various divisions, Chung brings all those divisions together, and so whether it's the Office of Safety, the Office of Operations, Office of Construction, whatever they are, he brings a team together to manage work zone safety as a centralized process. So we're very pleased to have Chung here, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the programs that are going on at the Federal Highway Administration. So please welcome Chung Ng.
Thank you, Brad, and welcome to Cincinnati. I don't know if you've heard following the news, but in the D.C. area we've had record amount of snow, and I was hoping that this thing would be somewhere where it'd be nice and sunny and warm, but unfortunately it came to more snow. So, but anyway, again, I wanted to welcome all of you on behalf of Federal Highway to this event. Safety has always been one of the highest priorities, I guess, within our agency, and likewise with work zone safety. So, so as part of the Safety Lou initiatives, there were a number of things that were undertaken to focus specifically on work zone safety, as most of you already know. In addition to Subpart K, which was a follow-on to the work zone safety and mobility rule, yes, we had the clearinghouse, I guess, element in there. As Brad mentioned, this program that had begun a number of years ago, but Safety Lou provided additional funding that helped, revitalize, I think, certain aspects of it. And, if you haven't visited the site lately, be sure to do that. I think it's a rich source of information. You're able to find a great deal of materials there through a pretty robust search mechanism. In addition to that, there were a number of safety grants that were funded as part of the Safety Lou initiative. And that included the number of grants to individuals or parties, including the Laborers' Health Safety Fund of North America. I guess it's Scott sitting here. I think he's going to have something to talk about a little bit. Also to ATSA and to Wayne State University, as well as the Illinois Institute of Technology. And all of that is focused on providing additional guidance and training related to help advance the area of work zone safety. So, and this workshop in itself is a result of part of that the product as far as coming out of the clearinghouse effort, and it summarizes some of the findings and the materials that are coming out of the safety grant effort. So there are a number of things that are already developed. There are still things that are going to be coming on board. So keep an eye out and look for more of the materials. And the clearinghouse is a good source to stay on top of what's coming. Okay.
And if you haven't caught it already, the website address for the clearinghouse is just workzonesafety.org, workzonesafety.org, so be sure and go there. All right, we're next pleased to hear from Danessa Quintero from the OSHA's Directorate of Construction. A lot of activities have been going on at OSHA, especially since the change in administration, and Danessa is here to update us a bit about that. Danessa is a civil engineer. She works in the headquarters of OSHA in Washington, D.C., and specializes in work zones. Prior to that, she worked in the Fort Lauderdale area office, and is a trainer, has worked in a lot of different areas within OSHA, and also is a civil engineer for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Forest Service. Originally, she's from Puerto Rico, so we have the advantage of bilingual information from Danessa, so thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. Like he said, my name is Danessa Quintero. I work as a Senior Safety and Health Specialist for the Director of Construction in the National Office. Today, basically, I'm going to go over some of the agency new activities, goal, and priorities, and also some of the Director of Construction new activities. At the present time, I would like to mention that in December of 2009, we were very pleased to basically hear from the United States Senate by saying that Mr. David Michaels, a scientist from the George Washington University, was appointed as the new Assistant Secretary for OSHA. Mr. David Michael used to be the head of the Department of Safety for the Department of Energy, so he's someone that brings a lot of information, ideas, and new goals for the agency. OSHA is in a lot of transition at this time. I'm really happy to let you guys know that a few months ago, at the end of 2009, the OSHA and the Roadway Safety Alliance was renewed. The OSHA Safety Alliance basically is a combination of a lot of partners, which include NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, NAPA, ARTVA, American Road and Transportation, Laborers, the Union of Operating Engineers, and I'm really happy to have the opportunity to participate in this alliance because in this alliance, we're able to create new products, disseminate our products, and be able to reach to a lot of employers and employees that we were not able to do that in the past. So by having the opportunity to work with all these organizations, we have been able to bring to the table the cream of the crop and be able to create products that are very accurate and specific to the needs of everybody that is working on anything related to work, road, and roadway activities. One of the goals of the Alliance is to work with OSHA to provide expertise to develop and disseminate this information. In December of 2009, one of the things that we were able to benefit from is to be able to train a lot of new compliance officers that are coming to the agency. One of the new administration activities basically to increase enforcement and the creation of new standards. So in 2009, we create approximately like 100 new positions for compliance officers. And by having all these new kids there basically doing inspections, we're running out of time to move at the same speed that all this money that is going to road is going in place. So basically one of the things that we did, we took advantage of this new roadway safety CD. We went over through some modules and we were able to present all these modules which represent the hazards associated with work zone to a lot of compliance officers, more than hundreds of compliance officers on a webinar, and we're really, really happy to have that opportunity. Basically, as informed by the Secretary of Labor, there will be a big reduction and funding will be taken away from the BPP. What is the BPP? The Voluntary Protection Program, which is the program that promotes effective worksite based on safety and health. In the BPP, management, labor, and OSHA established a relationship at workplace that have complement and comprehensive safety and health management system. But basically, that money that will be taken away basically will be redistributed throughout the enforcement activity and also the creation of new standards. The reason why it has been identified that a lot of standards, like some of you might be aware, the standard related with signs and signals and barricade is a standard from the 1988, and on MUT, and we have an MUTCD that basically was out there in the 2009. So we really need to move speed ahead with all these new standards. So this is one of the priorities of this new administration. In addition to that, every area office has a compliance assistance specialist, and this is the non-enforcement side of the agency. And what we're doing, we also reducing the funding is going to the compliance assistance specialists and trying to develop new strategies, new techniques, on how to reach all these employers and employees. And the numbers will show you why. In addition to that, this year, we're going to have our first Latino Safety and Health Summit. The goal of the summit will be to reduce injuries and illness among Hispanic Latino workers, enhancing knowledge to their workplace rights and improving their ability to exercise these rights. It has been identified, and we're aware that it's very, very well known that this Latino and construction worker really doesn't know which one are their rights. They're afraid to complain about unsafe working conditions, and it's very important that we're able to reach them so we can know where the problems are and where the hazards are. The summit will showcase innovative partnerships, demonstrate successful education and training strategies, and develop effective enforcement and communication strategy. It will be in the Hilton Las Americas in Houston, Texas. Summit will bring faith organizations, something that we haven't partnered with in the past, community organization, academia, educator, and a lot of other government agencies. So we're really looking forward for this activity to take place. We're also going to bring the Mexican Consulate and Catholic Church. Like Brad was mentioning before, numbers. BLS numbers show basically that all fatalities in 2007 went up to 5,657, and just the construction fatalities were 1,200, approximately 1,200. A few months ago, I remember when I was reviewing one of the fatalities investigation, an employee was using a small single drum roller and compaction with a seat and rollover protection to contact a roadway under construction. The roller drifted into a 2-foot ditch on the side of the road, and the roll on its side, pinning and killing an employee. In all these numbers that we have here, this is a very, very small number. We really are not capturing the number of people that get hurt on the job, that lose an arm, a finger, and basically those numbers are thousands and thousands of accidents that occur on a daily basis. As I speak right now, someone's friend, a father, a coworker is getting hurt on the job. And it's very important that like Brad said, one at a time, and I really reach to all of you to help us and provide us all this help that we really need and what we're looking for. Struck by, caught in between, electrocution and falls continue to be the priority and where most of the accidents occur. How basically the OSHA conduct their inspections, and now with all this funding on ARRRA, how the agency is basically bringing that information to the table to be able to conduct the investigation. OSHA conduct investigation in two different ways. The investigations or the inspections can be program or on-program inspection. The program inspections are the one that we do on a regular basis, the complaints, the referrals, fatalities, but which one are the program inspections? And that's where all the IRA come from. We basically contract with the University of Tennessee, and the University of Tennessee usually put what is called a Dodge report together. On that Dodge report, we buy information from McGraw-Hill, and in there all the different activities and all the projects that have been granted to different and companies are basically included in that report. There's some area office that are complaint-driven or fatality-driven, but there's some others that basically work everything with program inspections. We go to this list, we pull one, we find the direction and the address and the name of the company. The only problem with this report, sometimes the project haven't even started, sometimes the project has been completed. So the information is not really that accurate, but it's one of the ways that we're using at this time to be able to identify all the projects that are there at the present time. The numbers continue, and basically, like we said, continue steady. We all agree that preventable worker injuries, illness, and death are expensive, disruptive, wasteful, and completely unnecessary. Under the new administration, we have stepped up the volume of enforcement. The agency also issued the highest OSHA fine when we issued an $87 million citation to a company called BP for failing to correct hazards that continue to threaten the health and safety of the employees. With more focus on enforcement and standard, OSHA is hiring. The President 2010 budget appropriated $558 million, a 10 increase from over the budget of 2009, enabling the agency, like I mentioned before, to hire more compliance officers, standards writers, and whistleblower investigations. The most frequently cited in construction continue to be the easy and simple ones that usually we say, but you know, we continue to have the same problems over and over again. Lack of fall protection on scaffold, lack of fall protection at the edge of a building, employee exposed to falls of more than 6 feet or more. We're not taking under consideration any engineering control to eliminate the hazard, any passive or active activity. Basically, what some companies are doing, just ignoring completely that the hazard exists and not taking any action. When I do some of my OSHA 10 hours and some of my training, basically some of the safety professionals that come to the table, they basically say, but we continue, this presentation was too simple, this presentation basically it doesn't bring like something out of the ordinary, but it's not out there. The hazards and the fatalities continue to be the simple ones, the ones that can be prevented. So the culture of the company need to be improved, need to be changed. Something that also the agency is working, we have a new national emphasis program for record keeping. It has been identified that employees basically they don't record the the employees don't record the information, and the employees don't complain about it. They don't report the information. They are afraid to lose their jobs. So basically there's a new emphasis program that the agency is working with to be able to capture all this data. Data need to be accurate, data need to be improved so the agency can be aware and can identify how everybody can benefit from it. In the Directorate of Construction, we're going over a big transition. 3 of the key players, the most important positions in the agency, are vacant. At the present time, the Director of Construction is going to open the director position. We're looking for someone basically to help us with to move the agency into a new activity, new goals, new position that we can be more effective. The director for the Office of Construction Service, the office that deal with the stakeholders, the alliance, the partnerships, new publication, is also looking for a new director. We're going to have 2 new staff open position for the construction service and few open position for the engineering service. If any of you that might be interested, all the positions are basically posted on the OSHA website or the Department of Labor website. Enforcement overview. The enforcement overview. In addition of the work zone projects, we have, the agency is dealing with a big challenge right now of green jobs. We are working also with new hazards associated to wind turbines, photovoltaic, geothermal, something that we haven't explored and we haven't worked with in the past. Because of the need of new ways or energy activities, the agency is moving at 100 miles an hour, to basically be able to move at the same speed that the industry is moving in everything related to green jobs and activities. We're also working with the National Institute of Occupational Health, Safety and Health, and they have a task force which is putting together a lot of activities and work groups. Protective measure, high visibility clothing, traffic control devices, work zone protection plans, law enforcement and public awareness, and workers training continue to be some of the different type of protective measure. In 2002, OSHA amended its construction standard for signs, signals, and barricade to incorporate the MUTCD of 1988 and also the millennium, and we continue running under that regulation. However, in 2006, there was a big OSHA Review Commission case between Labor's and Roblin Company, and in 2009, the Director of Construction reissued an interpretation letter that clarified OSHA position regarding the requirement for the use of high apparel in highway construction. Roadway construction traffic possess an obvious and well-recognized hazard to high and road construction work zone. OSHA standard require that such employee wear high visibility in 2 different instances. One instance is when that employee is working as a flagger, and the other instance is when employees working near an excavation. However, at the present time, those employees working on a work zone area that are not wearing a high visibility vest, a 5A1 citation will be issued to the companies that not provide high visibility vests. However, other workers, it doesn't matter who it is, as long as they're in there, they need to be provided by a high visibility vest. The reason why it was identified on the Federal Highway, new Federal Register, that giving a driver more time, having the high visibility vest, it will give the driver more time to avoid possible accidents. The reason of the decision is basically the one as follows. Workers on foot continue to be struck by vehicles, as simple as that, and something needs to be done. So by giving a high visibility vest, we completely encourage everybody to do that because it's really going to provide more time to those drivers. Yeah. Okay, here we go. In addition of the information that I provide you by the ARRA, how the agency basically identifies all those projects, the agency has an advisory committee on safety and health that it constitutes of 50 members from the public sector, representing the public sector and representing the private sector and representing the government. At the present time, our next meeting, it will be in Houston, Texas. We have been, the work group has presented information to the Secretary of Labor about different RRIA projects. One of the things that we identify is not just that new hazards are not there. The hazards continue to be the same. However, we need to target all those companies that rather than do what they used to do in the past, in the last 10 years, these are companies that are not familiar and aware of the hazards associated with work zone construction. Someone that used to be residential construction, now working in roadway construction. So how those employees and those employers can be aware and how we can train them on how to recognize these hazards. So that's something that almost everybody have been able to bring to the table. At the present time, the advisory committee, which I really would like to see all of you get involved. All the information, all the minutes are available on the OSHA website, and it will be able to help you to be aware and familiar where the agency is going. We have new work groups. The new work groups that we have at the present time is the silica and other construction health hazard. In the past, the work group was just identifying silica hazards, but we identified that it's very important that we identify other health hazards. Prevention by design is something that is also new. This work group, basically what we do is try to involve engineers, architects, before the project has been granted. Everything that is on the table, everything that is on the drawings, we can identify in there where we need to include some kind of anchorage points and how we can prevent, be very proactive, and identify all those possible ways to improve safety at the workplace. Some of the others that are available, diversity, women's in construction, education and training is very controversial. Green jobs that like I mentioned before, multilingual issues in construction safety, nail guns, and residential fall protection, which continue to be something that is very, very interesting. OSHA standards, where the OSHA standards are going and where we're putting all our effort at the present time. OSHA has accelerated its effort to develop long-awaited standards addressing worker exposure to numerous of job safety. In recent months, we have revised our enforcement policy for fall protection during steel erection. The letter of interpretation that I mentioned for high visibility warning garments. We issue a directive final rule for acetylene hazards. And in coming months, we're going to be continue working on the final rule for confined space in construction. And resign OSHA compliance directive on residential construction. The most important and the one that we commit committed to basically complete on July of 2010. We're preparing for the final rule in the new Crane and Derek's rulemaking. And that's basically, it gives you a picture of all the activities and all the things that we're working with at the present time. In addition of that, we developed a lot of new quick cards and fact sheets for everybody to take advantage and be able to disseminate among your workers. If you have any question, please give us a call, and thank you very much for listening. Any question? Good.
Yes, can you please come to the mics if you have questions so we can capture.
Two simple ones.
Sure.
The summit for the,
Sure.
when was that again? Was that April?
April 14 and 15.
15, okay, good. And then the other one was, you went real quick on the PPE for, on the vehicle operators. We get this, and I know it sounds real petty, and I want to know, but because once they step out of the vehicle onto our right-of-way, they got to put the PPEs, but do they have to wear them inside the vehicle? I know it's really, I don't know, they don't really say, but
There's four
But
things,
there's
okay, to
yeah,
answer your question, there are four things that are necessary for the agency or the compliance officer to be able to issue a citation. One basically is a standard. The standard will be the 5A1, where the industry recognizes that there's a hazard, there's a problem, and it can be abated and corrected. The second one is employer knowledge, and the most important and the one that you mentioned is the employee exposure. When he's inside that equipment or inside that vehicle, the employee is not exposed to the unsafe condition. If he's being impacted or hit by a vehicle, he's protected. He's inside with his seatbelt. It's like being inside a vehicle. As soon as he steps out, then the employee exposure will be there. And then the hazards will be, what about the severity and the possibility? And that will come to the table to identify the amount of the citation. Anyone else? Sure.
One of the big buzzwords right now in the DOTs is not only enforcement and engineering, but education. How is OSHA reaching out? Because I'm not very familiar with a lot of these OSHA regulations. How do I find out about them? How do you reach out and educate us how to comply and avoid these big fines and keep our people safe?
Exactly. There's two key players in here, basically the employer and the employees. First of all, if we're talking about the employers, OSHA has the OTI Center in Chicago, but the OTI Center basically deals with the compliance officer. In addition of the OTI Center in Chicago, we had education centers around the country. And in all these ed centers, they offer the OSHA 500s and the OSHA 30 and the OSHA 10. The OSHA 10 is more focused for the employees, and most of you might be aware that some states, now the OSHA 10 is required for projects more than $250,000. Some other states are a little bit different, but some states require that make that completely mandatory. Now, the OSHA 30 is more focused, and the goal is basically to provide that information to the foremen. And the OSHA 30 is also provided in all these educational centers. That's one way to do it. The second way to do it, every state has the consultation service. Every employer that has 250 employees or less can benefit from that. And 250 is a lot of employees. However, that's the way that the rule works. So every state has the consultation service that is like hiring a consultant, paying a consultant. And that consultation service is completely for free. And that's separate from for the enforcement side of the agency. If they observe, if they find any unsafe condition, will they report it to OSHA enforcement side? No, they're not going to do that. They're basically going to work with you to help you to abate those unsafe conditions. The only reason why someone will report it, the consultation service, will be, after we're telling you and work with you over and over again, you neglect it and you decide not to do anything. So then they have their hands tied because now they know that an unsafe condition exists and nothing has been done. The third way to do it, usually every September, and in July, the agency received around, let's say, $7 to $20 million for grants. Agencies are organizations like American Roadway Transportation, laborers, the operating engineers, basically organization, a non-profit organization, they basically apply for grants, and if they receive it, depending on what activity they're going to be working with, I will imagine that this year, with all the amount that is going to ARRA projects, the topics of the grants, don't record this because I haven't seen the paper, the Federal Register, but I will imagine that you will see work zone activities. One of the topic will be something related to work zone. One of the topic will be something related to green jobs. One of the topics might be something related to the focus for. And we're going to be basically trying to find out different ways to be able to reach the employees and also to reach the employer. When it's something with a grant, all those trainings are completely for free. So you can give us a call, we can tell you who received that grant, and basically you can contact them to go and be able to go yourself or to send your employees to go and take training completely for free. What else? So there's many ways that you can receive training. In addition to that, through all the alliance, we develop simple, quick products that being able, for those of you that haven't benefit, you can attach that to your employee's paycheck. It's completely for free. Everything that is in OSHA webpage is public record. All those quick cards, who of you doesn't know about the OSHA quick cards, the OSHA fact sheets? You need to maintain your employees informed. That's like telling your kids over and over and over and over again the same thing until they basically get it and digest it and make it part of their system, part of their daily basis activity. So in addition to that, you can give us a call and we can help you to navigate through the website and let you know where you can get all this information. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of walk through some of the things that we've talked about and put a little different nuance on them, and then add some additional information. One thing I'd just like, by a raise of hands, how many of you are with a state agency, a DOT? Yeah, a lot of you. And so I would assume, how many of you feel a little unfamiliar with OSHA and what OSHA does? It's a little bit of that, because we've talked about it for a number of years, making sure that the traffic safety knows what the occupational side of safety is doing and try to balance that act, and we continue to do that. Just to add a little bit to what Danessa has said, if any of you are interested in getting some more OSHA-type training, right now, through a grant that Chung Ing had mentioned, there are several that are going on. One, a little bit later this morning, the next session of presentation, you're going to see a training program on a CD that's available for free. Tons of great information, and AASHTO is a partner in that, so you'll be able to get some information through AASHTO, through us, and through others. Also, for the OSHA 10-hour programs, if you're looking to get those at no or low cost, right now, we are working with the local technical assistance program, the LTAP centers in all the states, and putting on OSHA 10-hour courses through those that are free, and they're focused on roadway construction. They're not just a kind of a generic program. So there's a lot of possibilities out there. We just need to make you aware of them. Let me just take a few minutes to go through and highlight some of the things that we already talked about, but just to put a little bit of an underscore on that. With the AARA program, OSHA received $27 million in that program to step up enforcement. So where in many states OSHA was really not a big player in the enforcement side in heavy and highway construction, we're seeing a lot more of that now. And as Danessa mentioned, we've trained compliance officers to understand roadway construction. So we're likely to see them. They specifically target AARA projects. And so enforcement has changed. With the new administration, you know, often in Washington it's kind of a pendulum that swings back and forth and depends on who's in power, what things are emphasized. Under the previous administration, the Bush administration, we saw a lot of emphasis on compliance programs, voluntary compliance, alliances, partnerships. I guess you'd call it the softer side of safety. The new administration has said, hey, we didn't see a lot of progress in worker fatality reduction in the last few years, so now the pendulum has swung the other way. We're seeing a lot more emphasis now on standards and enforcement, and that's going to kind of be the new thing to look for. The DOL Secretary Solis, here's what she said upon taking office. We'll send a loud and clear message to all recipients of recovery funds. If you want these funds, you need to make sure that your workplaces are safe. OSHA will implement a multi-tiered enforcement program to assure worker protection on AARA-related projects. Through the development and implementation of emphasis programs, OSHA will direct enforcement efforts to stimulus package-related construction, infrastructure, and green energy projects. So again, we're likely to see a greater involvement of OSHA in our work sites now. Again, the leadership at OSHA, David Michaels, former director of safety for the Department of Energy, worked for a number of years as a professor at George Washington University, a strong safety advocate, very well versed in industrial health and hygiene issues, and Jordan Barab, a long history working with AFSCME, the state employees union, then worked for a number of years on the Hill American Chemical Investigation Board, so he's got a lot of experience here, and he's the Deputy Assistant Secretary at OSHA. Again, these are things that Danessa had mentioned, but some of the standards that are confined spaces and cranes and derricks likely to come out very soon. We're expecting OSHA to work on a silica standard. That affects our industry very directly, especially if you're doing any kind of cutting of asphalt, concrete, those types of operation. Likely to see noise in construction standard changed. And while OSHA is not going to start likely a new ergonomic standard, they have changed their law to where ergonomic injuries now have to be recorded on the 300 log, reintroduced that requirement. So we'll be looking at ergonomic and musculoskeletal sprains and strain type injuries. I'll just skip through some of these because Danessa covered them. The one thing I'd just like to highlight, and in the next session we're going to go into some depth on the high visibility standard and what that means and what kind of clothing and what's a class 1 and a class 2. So we'll go over that in detail, but there's a couple of things here that I just want to highlight that we're working to clarify because it's not clear in Washington exactly what's going on. As you are aware, Federal Highway issued a standard 2 years ago that required high visibility vests and ANSI Class 2 when you're in the right-of-way of a federal aid highway. They now, with the new MUTCD, have said you need at least a minimum Class 2 on any roadway construction project. And of course, how does Federal Highway Administration enforce those rules? Well, it's through contracts. It's money. They don't send inspectors out. OSHA, on the other hand, issued a letter of interpretation in August that basically said, we will cite you, and we don't have a specific standard because we haven't updated our signs, signals, and barricade standard, but we're going to use our general duty clause, and we're going to cite you if you're not wearing vests on any roadway construction project. The quandary we have here is the OSHA letter of interpretation does not define what class of garment. It doesn't say it's an ANSI Class 2. We assume that, but it's not clear. So we're working for some clarification of that. But OSHA will issue a penalty. And what can happen, you know, a serious penalty can be $7,000. And you multiply that by every employee who's not wearing a vest. It's a possibility. They may not do that, but it is a possibility that 7,000 times 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 workers on a site, we can see penalties rack up very quickly. So it is something to take very seriously. I'm looking a little bit again about what Federal Highway is doing, because they too have been issuing a lot of new regulations in our area, of which you may be more familiar. The new MUTCD that just came out in the end of 2009, and I'll talk about some of the highlights very briefly in Part 6 of that. Implementation of Subpart K. This is the standard that requires DOTs to look very seriously at what they're doing in their contracting practices to make sure that safety is taking place. We're working right now with Federal Highway Administration to develop some compliance documents to help explain what Subpart K does. But some of the important features is it requires the DOTs that when they're issuing contracts to road construction projects, that they have to look at the safety aspects separately. It can't be incidental to the other parts of the bid. And so things need to be considered of make sure that the contractor, and in their bid documents, they're explaining adequately how they're going to pay for quality traffic control. Temporary traffic control devices. How do we make sure those are of good quality and are maintained? This provision, Subpart K, came about as a result of contractors saying, look, we work in a low bid system, and if I have really good quality traffic control devices and I'm investing in those, and my competitor is using stuff that's 20 years old, that the retroreflective tape is not working, they're dirty, they're underbidding me. So how can I compete and be a good, safe contractor when we work on a low bid system? Subpart K was an attempt to try to mitigate and level that playing field. And so there are issues there, and I don't think really Federal Highway and the DOTs and the contracting industry have got their arms around Subpart K as it's truly intended by Congress. So there's a lot more looking, and we'll be discussing some of that later on today as well. We've talked about PPE on federal aid highways, and now that's evolved with the MUTCD. And again, Subpart J works on assessment, replies more to the DOTs in making sure that the impacts of the work zones are not too profoundly felt on neighboring businesses. Some of the changes to the MUTCD that just highlight quickly. There's new guidance on the length of short tapers and downstream tapers. I'm not going to go into all these, but just let you know about some of the changes to Part 6 that will be taking place. They do have now this new standard on high visibility safety apparel. It applies to all roads, not just those on the federal highway. It applies to law enforcement, but there's a different type of public safety vest. Again, we'll go into more detail later. And this compliance, we have about a year to get ready for Federal Highway Administration enforcement of this rule. Now the MUTCD allows for automated flagger assistance devices. They have been tested in the past. They're now a documented allowed process in the MUTCD. Other new requirements that you'll find in Part 6 of the MUTCD deal with flagging and signaling, work zone signing, pavement markings, lane delineation, temporary traffic control plans for events that affect traffic. So now if you have, in Washington to see if the Redskins are playing, and anybody happens to go to the game because they really stink lately, but if it's going to affect traffic, there's got to be a traffic control plan. And so these major events that you anticipate will affect traffic control plans are now required, not just for construction and maintenance activities. New guidance on typical application and how those are treated, and provisions now again for incident management. So some of the changes that have gone on to the MUTCD. If you're interested, as we mentioned earlier, the Work Zone Clearinghouse provides free webinars. And the two people at Federal Highway Administration most responsible for the MUTCD, Hari Kala, who oversees the whole entire MUTCD, and Ken Wood, who specializes in Part 6, provided a webinar for us about a month ago on what the changes were. Now that webinar, maybe you didn't catch it when it was presented, but it's on the Clearinghouse, it's archived, you can go and view that anytime and get a little bit more update, a little more detail on what's happening with that. And there's a lot of information, again, on the Clearinghouse. These webinars, every time we present one, they're archived and information is there. So that's kind of where we are. We're running a little ahead of schedule, so we have some time for more questions. If you have questions of me, any more of Danessa, I think Chung might have slipped out the back, but I'll answer questions for Federal Highway if you'd like. I can give some pretty good answers, I suppose. Any questions there on any of these regulatory changes in Washington and what's happening in the agency? One thing I might mention, we talk a lot about funding and what's going on with funding. I hear a lot of contractors and maybe all these folks with the DOT saying, money's really tight, it's not flowing. The interesting thing to note is there is more money, federal money, going into roadway construction than at any time in our history. We're spending annually around $40 million, plus with the stimulus money, another $29 million. That stimulus money, from the last data I saw, only about 25% of that has actually been spent. About 90% has been obligated, and the projects are getting ready to ramp up. But so there's still a little bit of hurt there because not all that money has made it out of the agencies into the marketplace. But there's a lot of money coming out. But what we are seeing is state spending has been curtailed significantly because of the budgets, tax revenues at a state level are being cut back. But there's a lot of money out there. There's also a lot more competition. A lot of contractors that were doing general construction, commercial construction, residential, are starting to try to move into the heavy and highway construction industry because there's money there. So there's more competition. So these are some of the factors that we see, at least on a national level, that are affecting the industry. But the reality is there's a lot of money out there. And a lot of, so hence OSHA has taken a lot bigger interest in our industry and are inspecting it. So any other questions? If not, here we go. I want to hear it. Please go to the microphones because we're recording this and we won't capture your voice if you don't.
Recently I read something where a contractor was not given a contract under the new aid program because they didn't report their OSHA citations properly. Does anybody know about that?
Something that I can say, maybe if you're a subcontractor, if the person was a subcontractor, maybe it was a subcontractor?
It was a general contractor.
The general contractor. No, usually, I'm not familiar with that, but usually subcontractors are not hired by general contractors because they don't have accurate data on the OSHA log.
No, it was a federal fund.
But a complete connection between the ARRA projects and OSHA information or records, no, I'm not familiar with that.
We do know that AARA projects require a lot more reporting by the contractors on their safety and health performance, and each state is probably handling that a little bit differently on those reporting requirements. So that might have been a state, something that happened at the state DOT level rather than at a federal or national level. But there are a lot more reporting requirements. When you get these projects, OSHA gets information about that too, and so they're much more likely to be inspected. But that's... If we found out a specific instance of it, like I say, each state are implementing these AARA regs a little bit differently. The clearinghouse does have some information on that. I'm not sure it could answer a specific state by state. I don't think we've done any kind of breakdown on that. And if any of the DOTs here have some information, we'd welcome your feedback on that as well. Anyone else? All right, before we break, I'd like to introduce Jerry Ullman at the back of the room. He slipped in. Jerry, stand and wave. Jerry is our partner at the Texas Transportation Institute, and he oversees all of the web operations of the clearinghouse, and they do a tremendous job down there, as well as many other activities. We'll hear from Jerry later this morning. All right, well, let's take a short break. We'll be back with our next presentation on the Roadway Safety Training Program. It's a phenomenal program. You have the CD in front of you. If you just pick up the CD, you'll have no idea what the program can do unless you really see it functioning. So I encourage you to stay tuned, come back, and you'll see some very good information on how you can use this program to train your agency and your folks. So thank you. We'll see you in